What's your initial reaction, at least, to what Secretary Mnuchin said yesterday? He wants to raise that federal debt ceiling in August. I assume that you're resistant, but what would you want in exchange for that?
No, well, and actually, the Freedom Caucus had a meeting with Secretary Mnuchin this week, and we talked about it, and we were actually, don't want to shock anybody, we were in agreement. We would like to deal with the debt ceiling before August, but we want to have something on there that is has historically been done. Basically, anything important that's helped rein in the massive overspending had to be put with something like the debt ceiling in order to get it done. So there are things we can do, whether it's further welfare reform, work requirements, and no, that's not because we don't care about the poor. It's because after 30 years, I saw the charts at a Harvard seminar at Harvard where they were showing that for the first 30 years after welfare, single moms' income when adjusted for inflation flatlined. When they put in the work requirement for the first time since welfare started, single mom income, when adjusted for inflation, sharply went up for the 10 years. And then, of course, Obama hurt the poor people by eliminating that requirement, and we had more people not working. But anyway, something like that, something that will encourage people to get out and work, something that will encourage more income. And let me tell you about CBO. I could care less what CBO said. You know, they said Obamacare was going to be 1.1, 1.2. Obama calls Elmendorf, the director over the Oval Office, woodsheds him a while. He comes out, you know what, it's really probably around $800 billion. And then after it passes, well, maybe it's 1.7 or so. And then we hear, well, more like 2.6, and over 15, at least 4 trillion. So I continue to say any entity that's margin of error is plus or minus 260 to 400%, they should not be scoring anything.
Right.
And Art Laffer heard that, and he got a private grant. He and his son have worked out a proposal where we would have competition in scoring, so we could score the scores. Because this ridiculous CBO scoring, I think if you ask CBO how much federal revenue would we bring in with a 200% income tax, they'd come back and say, well, you'll bring in twice as much as anybody makes. I could care less what CBO says. They couldn't find their rear end with both hands. It's just not good count. They've never given us good, effective scores.
So, Congressman, let's talk about good counting, because that's one of the problems we've had. We've now got a budget that's been sent out to Capitol Hill. An awful lot of people out there saying it just doesn't add up. I mean, before you decide what you want to do or don't want to do, how concerned are you that the math doesn't work? That's not the budget you'd put forward if you were in a corporation going to a board of directors.
Well, it depends on which part of the math you're talking about.
Well, okay, let's say, for example, tax cuts, the benefits of the tax cuts without the cost of tax cuts. How about that point?
Without paying. Now, see, that's one of those issues. If you have a 1 or 2% rebate or something like Bush did, it doesn't really affect the federal revenue bringing more in. But you have big cuts like Kennedy and Reagan did, it affects additional income coming into the federal revenue. And like Ireland found out, when you have additional revenue coming in more than ever, you can't overspend in record amounts. So we got to have some restraint when the money starts coming in. But I agree with Laffer. We ought to say, forget what the score is on a massive tax cut like we're talking about. And I've encouraged the president twice, don't let people here in Congress talk you into raising that 15% corporate tax to 20. If we're at 15, we undercut China. We bring manufacturing jobs back. We put millions more to work. The federal revenue goes up, and we don't care what CBO says. I'd like to get rid of them entirely.
Congressman, finally, you're a student of history. Has it ever happened in the history of the United States of America where we have cut tax rates and saved that money rather than spent it? If you go back to the Reagan administration, the deficit went up. It did not go down.
You're right. Well, Tip O'Neill was a speaker that Reagan was dealing with, and you're right. You're really right to point that out. It is a huge concern of mine. We have a big tax cut. I think we get massive new revenue in, and we have got to show restraint for the first time in my lifetime and restrain the spending, not go nuts. I mean, you saw it with Ireland. You lower the tax rate, money comes in, and they get giddy and spend it. We cannot do that. I'm glad you brought it up. That's a very important point.